It's Wednesday, March 21st, 2012. We are here at the South Dallas Cultural Center in Dallas, Texas. And the following interview is part of the Dallas Museum of Art's History of Contemporary Art Collecting in Dallas Research Project, funded in part by the Texas Fund for Curatorial Research. I'm the Arnold, project researcher at the DMA, and I will be speaking here with Ms. Vicki Meek, artist, independent curator, cultural critic, educator, and manager of the South Dallas Cultural Center. I just read that it's your 15th anniversary of working here.
Actually, I'm in my 16th year.
Congratulations.
Shortly a year.
I will make a note of that. Well, thank you, Vicki, for agreeing to be interviewed and joining me to have this as part of our History of Contemporary Art project in Dallas. It's very important to have you here, so thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Great, so let's start at the beginning. You haven't always been a Texan.
No, I have not. And in fact, Texans will tell you I'm still not a Texan.
Really?
Well, you have to be born a Texan. So there you go. But I've been here for 30 years, actually going on 31. And I came here from Connecticut, where I used to work for the Connecticut Commission on the Arts. And but I'm a native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Great. And how did you first become interested in art?
Wow. Well, my family always had us involved in arts activities as little people. All of us would go to the museum. It was sort of like a Sunday event. The family would track down to the Philadelphia Art Museum. And so I was very young when I decided I wanted to be an artist. I started taking formal art lessons when I was 7. And that was at Fleischer Memorial Art School in Philly. Many of the artists who came through Philly went to that art school. It was run by the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And it was free to any public school kid that wanted to do it. And I was very enthused. All of us went there, but I actually decided I was going to be an artist when I was 8.
Wow.
So, yeah. That's a sculptor at that, not just an artist, but a sculptor, because I always took sculpture. I was always interested in three-dimensional arts. So my involvement with visual arts has been long-standing, and then my parents were collectors, so I saw art in the house. And then my brother, I had an older brother who started out as an artist, but ended up being a jazz musician because he did music and art both. I did dance and visual art. He did music and visual art. So I was always really thrilled by what he was doing because his work was really good. He could have been either one. But so that's how I got started.
Do you remember a particular work of art in the Philadelphia's collection that kind of turned that on?
Well, two things. There were 2 pieces in the collection, and I should say that wasn't the only museum that I would go to regularly. I would also go to the Rodin Museum regularly. And there were, obviously all of Rodin's work was very exciting to me as a little sculptor. But in the Philadelphia Museum, the Duchamp glass piece was
right. It's the full title. It's long.
It's long title. Nude Descending the Stair. Oh God, what was the title of it? I can't believe
something. It's like Bride.
They're all long titles.
Yeah, right.
It's the one that's the shattered glass.
Right. That one I was just intrigued by it because I hadn't seen anything like that as a sculpture, and so that was very, very influential. But mainly the Rodin Museum. I kind of lived in that museum.
That's great. Yeah. Good. So you go on to study art.
I do. I was never allowed to be an art major. My parents would not let me be an art major in school because they felt like that was a real weak program, which it was. And so I got my art classes on Saturdays.
Okay.
But I was an straight academic student up until I graduated. And I went to RISD. That was my first school, Rhode Island School of Design. But I was going to be a fashion designer.
Oh!
That lasted about 2 minutes.
Was that a way of combining your parents' kind of?
No, it was that I thought I was going to be.
Did you?
I studied French in school, and I always designed my sister's doll clothes. I wasn't very much into dolls, but she was, and so I had, her Barbie had like furs and all kinds of beautiful clothing that I designed. So I thought I was going to be a fashion designer. And RISD had the best fashion program at that time. This was like 1967 in the country. And so I went there and quickly figured out that I was not fashion world material.
What about that? Or how did you make that decision?
I can't be phony. I just don't know how. So, everybody was kissing each other. This was in college. This was before they were even out in the world. I went, oh, this doesn't bode well.
Yeah.
So, and quite frankly, at that time, there were no blacks in that world of any, stature. And there weren't very many women. I mean, most of it was dominated by gay white males. And so I'm a realist. I sort of looked around and went, this probably isn't going to work out. So I switched to sculpture. And they did not have a very strong sculpture program at RISD at that time. So about, I guess, beginning of my sophomore year, I transferred to Tyler School of Fine Arts. That did have a very strong sculpture program. And so I went there. And then I went overseas to the school in Rome. And actually, I should say that it was highly motivating, but it really was a whole lot of fun.
Good.
I didn't do a whole lot of work. I didn't know when I was going to get back to Europe, so I figured I got to see everything I could see. Yeah, but it was fabulous in terms of being exposed to such wonderful history that was living history, because to them it's not history. They live with the trading column right down the street, that type of thing. So that was a great experience from the standpoint of getting to see a lot of art that I had seen in books.
Right.
So.
Great. And then you go on to do some graduate work.
I went to graduate school at University of Wisconsin-Madison.
For your MFA?
MFA, yeah.
Right. So at this point, you are allowed to be an art major.
Oh, no. Once I went to college, they didn't have a problem with it. No, they just wanted to make sure that if I changed my mind, that I wouldn't be stuck. That if I decided I didn't want to be an artist, I'd have an academic background and could go into anything that I wanted. That's all they were concerned about. Because they knew that the training that I'd get at Fleischer would be far stronger than anything that I would ever get in public school anyway.
As far as arts?
Yeah. So I wouldn't be at a deficit for the art, but I would have been at a deficit if I was an art major in high school.
Gotcha.
So.
Good. And after your MFA, you go on to Kentucky?
Well, yes. It turns out that I graduated early, because I went to college at 16, so.
Oh my God.
Graduated.
Doogie Howser.
Not quite. My cousin was Doogie Howser. But so when I graduated, I got a BFA. When I graduated with a BFA, I was only 20 years old, and so no one was hiring me. So I said, well, I'll just go on and get an MFA. And then when I came out with my MFA, I was 23. And I got my first teaching job, and I was like as old as the students. Anyway, that was at Kentucky State University. And I chose Kentucky State because I really wanted to teach at an HBCU.
Can you describe that? Define that?
Historically Black College or University, that's what HBCU stands for. Because I felt like I came from a highly political family, and we were always, doing activist stuff, and I didn't know how I was going to be able to meld that with my art at the time. And so I thought, well, maybe I can contribute by teaching at a Black college and, raising up that next generation of artists. That could be my contribution.
Right.
Well, here's how it went down. As my dad said, an HBCU will make you do one of two things. You will either grow up quickly or you will lose your mind. And I did a little of both. So, but it was a great experience from the standpoint of teaching, because I love the students, but I'm not good with administrations.
No.
I don't follow rules real well, and I don't have respect for authority. There are all these things that just I don't have.
Plus, you were very young.
I was young, yes. I was young, and I was hot-headed, and did a lot of things that you shouldn't do at a university if you want tenure.
Right.
But I figured early on that no one was giving me any tenure anyway, so I could say what I wanted to say and do what I wanted to do and move on.
Do you have any students from that time that you still keep in touch with?
Yes,
That's
as
great.
a matter of fact, I do.
That's great.
One in Indianapolis. That's how I happened to know about
Max
Whitney. Yeah, I sure did, because of T's work there.
Great.
But it was a great experience from the standpoint of I was able to come into a brand new department, so I literally developed the sculpture program for them. They had never had African American art history, so I literally developed that program for them. So there were a lot of great things that I was able to initiate. And like I said, I love the students, so that part was wonderful. Kentucky, a little challenging.
I'm sure.
Yeah, especially Frankfort, Kentucky, which is where this school was, the capital.
And this would have been the early 1970s.
Yes.
Just right after the very, very
it was
hard period.
Well, I don't know if Kentucky ever really had a seriously hard period. I think
They're on
Kentucky
the
was,
border.
yeah, they were not clear what they were. You know, south, north, they didn't know what they were. But it was a small town, and it definitely was a challenge going from what I'm used to in terms of art resources. I mean, I would take my students to Louisville, but at that time, Louisville really didn't even have a whole lot. So we would take field trips to Cincinnati, which had, you know, good museums, and then on occasion to Chicago, which was a much longer trip, but we did it. Yeah, oh yeah, because they had to see art. You know, my thing is that you can't learn about art from books. You have to see some art. So, you know, I would try to get them out as much as possible.
Good. Yeah. And from Kentucky, you go to Connecticut, back north? Yeah,
what happened was I ran the gallery program at Kentucky State. And as a result of that, I had to start looking for resources because the college really didn't have any. And I got acquainted with the Kentucky Arts Commission and figured out, oh, wow, these people do this. And then I had some friends who were working for the Connecticut Commission on the Arts and told me about some jobs that were opening up. So I applied for them when I decided I needed to get back east because my baby sister was going to college and having some issues. So the family decided I was the one that was going to be able to get her through school.
Were you?
Well, she married a guy and dropped out, so it's kind of like, okay, but I'm in Connecticut now.
Yeah.
So. But it turned out that that job that I got, which was the Artisan Schools Coordinator, allowed me to really get to know the state well. So then when it came time to change jobs within the agency, I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and I became a senior program administrator for the whole agency in Fairfield County because I wanted to be near New York. So I convinced the agency that they needed to decentralize.
Yeah.
So
you must be a very commercial woman.
It's like, you can't possibly do this work in one place. And so we did. We decentralized the office, and we had me in Fairfield County,
right there,
job,
right?
And then somebody in Western Connecticut and somebody in Northern Connecticut, and that's how we ran it from there. And that's when I really kind of figured out the rest of my arts administrative life. You know, because I was able to do everything. I mean, I represented the agency, so I literally had to get involved with corporations. I helped develop arts councils in that area. We did, you know, I oversaw the Artisan Schools program that was working in that area. And so it was great.
Yeah, so it's the starting point really
for my serious arts administration background. And it's how I figured out I could make a living in the arts and not have to really compromise my work.
Good.
You know, so.
What brought you to Texas?
Well, it's, you know, the thing that brings all women to places where they'd never be a man. It's like, I had never even thought about Texas, but you know, my now ex-husband was here, and the choice was him moving up to New York. He was in public relations at the time, or me moving to Texas. And he had come here really on his way to California, but liked Dallas and stopped and got a job. I think he was at the time the PR person for the American Heart Association for national office. And so when we were talking about where we would be, my father was listening to him, and he was all excited about Dallas and the opportunities for a young black man who was in business and blah, 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 blah. And my father said, "You sound like you really like Dallas."
Yeah.
So he said, "I do." He said, "So have you said anything to her about this?" I said, "Well, you know, she wants me to move to New York, so I'm going to do what she wants me to do." He said, "Really? I don't think you need to do that. I think you need to tell her where you want to be, and she doesn't really care where she is." So he told me that. I was just like, okay, I'm game. I'll
Yeah.
test it out. So I came to Dallas in 1980.
Did you have any, you mentioned that you'd never even thought of Dallas, so you never had any kind of preconceived notions?
Well, they shot Kennedy. That's what my preconceived notion was. Well, they shot Kennedy. But, of course, I came from a political family, so I knew it had nothing to do with Dallas.
Right.
But no, I was actually intrigued by it. It was a notion of going to a place where there were, I was told, a lot of things happening. Of course, I got here and it was a whole different story. But anyway, I was willing. I was an adventurer. I liked going to new places, so it really didn't bother me at all that I was coming someplace that I'd never been.
Good. And how did you get involved in the arts here?
Well, truthfully, when I first came, I was really depressed because there was not a lot going on. It was really, to me, a dead kind of scene. And so I was really depressed, so I slept for about a year. And, every now and then I'd get up and go to the store. I didn't get a lot involved with anybody. But then I realized that this was a place where I could probably make some things happen if I was just willing to get in there and do some work. So I started looking around to see what I could do. And what came up was John Paul Batiste, who I actually had known before, was working for the City Arts program. And they actually wanted me to come and work for the program, and I was like, no, I'm going to do art. I came to Dallas to do some art. So they had a CETA program going on, and that program had been going on all over the country, and so I knew a lot about it. We had one in Connecticut. So I became a CETA artist, and I did residencies. I decided I wanted to do a residency in West Dallas, and so I did a residency at the West Dallas Girls Club. And then we decided that one of the things that this CETA program was going to do was not just have artists working in the community doing the usual kind of residency things, but that the artists could get to select something that they wanted to learn and use that as a part of their residency. So I decided I wanted to learn how to do graphic design because my ex-husband was starting his own PR company, and I figured I'd be the graphics part of that company. Yeah. Well, it should have been perfect, but it didn't quite work out that way. So that I started working with a public relations marketing company here as an intern, kind of. And but they gave me a studio in their offices so that I could do work for them. And that's what got me really. This was back in the days of cut and paste. Nowadays it would be like, I don't know what you people are doing. But this was the cut and paste days, and I was real good at that. So I did that, and I was doing graphics for my ex-husband for a minute, and that's about how long it lasted before we clashed heads, because my style of working is very different than his. And I'm kind of manic about perfection and things, which he was not quite that interested in that. So I started my own graphics company. And actually had quite a few clients, which allowed me to have the flexibility I wanted in terms of my time and what have you. And that lasted until I got pregnant with my first child.
What year was that?
In 82.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So from there on, it was mommyhood.
And how did you? So you were a CETA artist, which is Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. Federally funded.
Right.
And that was kind of your outlet, or how you kind of continued your own artistic practice?
Yes, because that was a job that allowed you to have, part of it was built in, that you would have time to do your work. So I started doing some exhibitions because I came with a good exhibition record, but I didn't have any outlets here. So I did an exhibition at the Bathhouse, the City Hall, they didn't really have any galleries that were interested in my work at the time. But I did start showing here, because these people didn't know anything about what I did. So it was great for that.
Good. And did it kind of promote any sense of a community amongst the artists?
Oh yeah.
For the
we were definitely a community of artists. I met some of the people that I'm still very good friends with today, Greg Metz and Laney Yarber, and there were a number of people who I met during that time period that I don't think we would have met if it hadn't been for us being involved in CETA.
So you come to Dallas and it's depressing. Did this program turn around anything or even start anything in improving your opinion?
No, I don't think so. I think what turned it around for me was Dallas began to turn around. I got back into arts administration in 1983 because Jerry Allen moved here as the director of the then City Arts program. And I knew about his work in Seattle. I was very respectful of that work. He was like the guru of public art nationally. And so he knew about my work in Connecticut. And so when he found out I was here, he, asked somebody to put some feelers out and see if she's interested in, because I had made it, this definitive, I'm not doing any more arts administration, I'm done. Yeah, famous last words. But in any event, so when he asked me if I would interview for a position, I said, okay, sure. The only reason I said sure was because of him and the fact that we wanted to buy a house and neither one of us had a real job. And the bank said, somebody's got to have a job that we can track. Yeah. So I said, okay, I'll take the job. And it was exciting though, because we were literally going to build this agency from the ground up. And he was going to allow me to really put together the community arts development program for the city. And that was exciting enough for me to get involved in it, at least for a couple of years.
Right, and we already kind of talked about the art scene at that time in Dallas. So we'll go on. Did you notice, or was there any support for minority artists in Dallas at that time?
None.
And has that ever been developed? And do you recall if there was a turning point when you started to notice that support?
Well, I wouldn't say that there really is a structured support system. I think that it wasn't until the late 90s when you even began to see any of the artists of color having any kind of traction as far as their ability to get into the galleries and to show and what have you, in something other than a ethnic specific environment. And still now, if you look around, it's still a pretty segregated city as far as that goes. I've been, an anomaly in many ways because when I came here, I'd already had an exhibition history. And so my life didn't have to be Dallas, Texas. In fact, even now it's not. My art life in Texas is in Houston. So it's still a city that's very stratified in my opinion. But we have seen some major changes in terms of exhibitions in the museum, galleries that have taken on some of the African American and Latino artists. We've seen many public art projects that have involved artists of color, and that's primarily because the art program was set up that way with the City Arts program. So that change has occurred, and I think that there's a lot more participation in terms of dialogue with artists of color that certainly wasn't happening back when I came here. So yeah, there have been changes, good changes.
Yeah. Do you have any exhibition you remember in your mind as being a turning point? Or?
Yeah, 2 centuries of Black American art, when that came to the museum. First of all, I think it opened up a lot of people's eyes, black, white, and others, of what's out there. Because prior to that, I don't think that there was a lot of knowledge about what African American artists were doing and the diversity of work that was being done by African American artists. A lot of the work that I saw here when I got here was pretty much genre, painting. And so the kind of work that I was doing, which was very politically driven in terms of the subject matter, was not terribly well received until 2 centuries of African American art came. And then it was sort of like, oh, these famous people are doing this, But I think also that was an exhibition that opened up the museum to a whole new audience of people. And so, quite naturally, when that happens, you begin to have a whole different dialogue happening within the institution. I think the other exhibition that was very important was the Jacob Lawrence exhibition, because Jake came and was able to have conversations with artists. A lot of these artists didn't know who Jacob Lawrence was. So that opened up a lot of avenues of conversation that hadn't happened before as well.
Great. Backing up a little bit, in 1986, two key things happened in your career. You're named director of the Art Visual Arts Center, and also the South Dallas Cultural Center opens, which of course becomes something later on. But can you tell us a little bit about the Art Visual Arts Center? You know, what was its mission, and how did you situate yourself within that mission?
Sure.
How you changed it?
Yeah, the mission of D-Art, when it started, it was designed to be a center that would serve local artists. And that was very broad in terms of, you know, the definition of what a local artist was. But it really was created to address the needs of the local artists, because of course, like every city, these local artists were complaining that they didn't have any kind of respect from the DMA, and, you know, most of the galleries weren't representing them. And so it was a repository for those artists to do workshops, exhibitions, seminars, anything related to the business of being a visual artist. Now, I didn't open it, so it was already open when I came on board. When I came on board, I was recruited by Patricia Meadows to come and really serve as the person that was going to take it into its next life, which was, they really were interested in getting more visibility nationally for the center, as well as not being seen as just a sort of Sunday painter kind of place. So I saw it as a challenge, you know, to bring some new energy into the institution, as well as to bring some diversity, because they didn't have, I don't think they had any at that time. So that's what I saw myself as being hired to do, is to really sort of open it up, bring some diversity to it, as well as raise the level of awareness about this institution nationally.
Do you recall any of the more memorable exhibitions or events you put on?
We did a lot. I mean, there was a lot that happened there. One of the major things that happened there that did not continue, unfortunately, but I was very interested in performance art. So I initiated a performance art series, and people like Leigh who was premier. She never really got her just due in this town, but she's a fantastic performance artist. Did work there. We had a collaboration going with UT Arlington, because at that time, Circa, which is no longer a Circa, it's now UT Arlington Gallery, but Jeff Kelly was running it, and so we would do collaborative projects where he might bring in somebody like Rachel Rosenthal, you know, a big name artist, and then we would do joint things with the art. We had one of the best parties Philip Glass has ever witnessed, so that was one of the things we did. Yeah, we did the after party for his performance at Titus, and it was quite a party, if I do say so myself. But performance art was one of the things that we did that was not done before, and then I initiated a series called Mosaics, which was to really show how diverse these artists are in our community, who are really professional artists. I mean, you know, you don't have to compromise quality or anything like that, but who were doing things that had something to do with their ethnic background. And it wasn't just African American artists, it was we did Barsanian, Hung Lu, I'm trying to think, there was a woman whose name is escaping me right now, but she was Arab from Lubbock. Yeah, and I do too in my notes somewhere. But it really was a wonderful series, and we did catalogs for that series. So it was a way of documenting the work, as well as having some writing done, because I was big on, you know, people writing. And then we also did a trying to think of some of the other things. Well, a lot of it was the collaborations that I did with UTA
Right.
that gave us a lot of visibility beyond the local scene.
And were you around when UTA brought in Alan Caprow? That
Yes.
tie-in?
Yeah, the person who brought Alan Capro in is Jeff.
Jeff.
Yeah,
And,
it's Jeff Kelly.
Right. So did you have the opportunity to talk to him about kind of what his performance are?
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely, yeah. That, I mean, like I said, that whole program was wed to ours, so that we would have this Dallas Arlington connection with the performance arena.
Good. Okay, so we've kind of touched on this, but I'm going to ask more directly. How do you reconcile the two sides of your career as an artist and an arts administrator?
Well, I guess it kind of depends on what you call reconciling, because I don't know that it ever really is reconciled. I mean, you know, I always look at my arts administrative career as it takes a lot of time. But one of the reasons that I have chosen to stay in it is because I found that for me, I know this is not necessarily true for everybody, but for me, teaching milks the exact same energy that it takes to produce my art, but running a center doesn't. So I can still be a practicing artist running a cultural center, but I can't do it when I'm teaching. So it's been the best of all worlds for me. I mean, you know, it's the lesser of the evils if you have to work. You know, at least I'm working in my field, and I'm creating opportunities for other artists. You know, because I don't normally show my own work in here at all. But it's an opportunity for me to bring art in here that I'm interested in seeing. So, yeah.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
And how do you see yourself fitting into kind of the contemporary art scene or just the contemporary arts landscape of Dallas?
I guess truthfully, I'm not really a part of that world. You know, I've never been represented by a gallery because I did installation for the most part. I have done installations at the DMA, and I've done them at the Urban Arts Center in terms of this community, and then of course at University of Texas in Arlington, and but the University of Houston and the whole Houston scene is really where I've done most of my work, and they only know me as an artist. They have no idea I'm an arts administrator. So, but it's been fine. You know, I don't have that need to be living in the space where I'm also doing my artwork. You know, like some people are like, oh, my town doesn't support me. I don't care. You know, it's like, I've got great support to do everything else that I want to do. You know, and it was a great place to raise my kids. You know, so those are the kinds of things that were important to me. And maybe I wouldn't be feeling this way if it weren't for the fact that I, you know, like I came here already as an established artist. I didn't have to try to establish my credibility as an artist here. So for me, the art scene, so to speak, in Dallas is not something that I am an active part of as an artist. I'm an active part of it as an arts administrator.
And how do you see yourself fitting in as an administrator?
Well, I think I'm well respected in this town, and I usually am included in whatever serious dialogues take place around the visual arts. And so you can't ask for much more than that, you know. And if there are things that happen, like for instance, you know, I was critical in setting up the dark art program and in structuring the public art program for the city. So those kinds of involvements are very satisfying to me.
Good. And we've talked about this around it really, but can you kind of describe how you came to have dual presences in Dallas and Houston?
Well, yes, that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
I don't even know how Michelle got my name, but Michelle Barnes, who is, you know, had a gallery for many years in Houston, and is a very big mover and shaker in the community down there. Somehow she got my name from somebody when she was looking to show work from somebody up here. She just wanted an artist from Dallas, and so somebody gave her my name. I don't even know who that was. And so she got in touch with me, and I sent her some images, and she said she really liked the work and wanted to know if I wanted to have a show. So I was like, okay, I could do that, but why? Because nobody there knows me. Because I'm thinking like Dallas, if nobody knows you in Dallas, no one's coming to your show. You know, that's just the way it is. So she said, oh, doesn't matter. You know, I like the work. People will come see it when they, come out to the gallery. And I was like, well, all right then. So I sent her the work, and then she had this opening, and I was figuring it was going to be me and her at the opening, and that was it. And the place was packed. And I was just enthralled by that. It was just such a different experience. So I found out that in fact, Houston was a place where people literally supported visual arts, whatever ethnicity they were, or whatever. They went to all the different venues, and when they had gallery night, it was like everybody roamed around to all the different places, and it was great. Well, from that exhibit, my name got to Rick Lowe. And at that point, Rick this was before Project Row Houses. He was curating a show. It was him and Joe Hobble were curating this show.
And I brought a catalog.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that! A little history.
I even took some notes because it reminded me a lot of work by other artists that I'm familiar with. But yeah, so it was this show.
Yes, it was Fresh Visions.
Fresh Visions. New Douglas School in Houston.
Right. So this show literally was what broke me into the bigger art scene in Houston. Because when Allison Green, who was curator for MFAH, the contemporary art curator, when she saw my installation, she bought it.
Right, because it's now in a permanent collection.
It's now in a permanent collection.
Can you describe that installation?
Yeah, that was my first installation where I was doing work around the Middle Passage. And the piece I called it like a memorial room. It was a very contemplative piece. It was a combination of the research that I had done on the Middle Passage and melding that with my own personal interest in the Yoruba religion and the spirituality around Yoruba and Ifa. And so the room itself employed some visual elements, but it also had sound and it also had smell, because all of that is important when you're involved in rituals around Yoruba. And she was just intrigued by that. And the next thing I know was like, we have to buy it. I had never even thought about installations being permanent. So it was like, how do I make stuff with candles burning? How do I make that permanent? So she said, don't worry about that. That's what museums are for.
Right.
We help you make that permanent. So they did. I mean, she got me together with her production staff. Is that what they call them? Yeah. Whatever they call them in museums.
Preparators?
Preparators, I don't know what they are. But anyway, the people who make things happen. And they came up with an electric candle that really looks like when it's on, that it's a flickering flame. But because you can't have an open flame for at the time at the museum, they had to change that. And I did a template for everything else, so that they can, put it in and take it out, put it in whenever they need to. And that was that. So then from there, once I did that show, Ricky decided he really wanted me to be in the first round of artists for Row Houses, which I just love that project. That was the best public art project I've ever been involved in, as far as I'm concerned. It's just superb. And so it was me, Jessie Lott, Annette Lawrence, Floyd Newsom, Tierney Malone, who else was in that? Claude, what was her name? Colette, BZ something or other. She's got two names. And I think there was one other person, but these houses were really, it was really fresh, so there were no expectations of what would happen. And you could do whatever you wanted. And so I used it as an opportunity to actually research that community, which was what I do anyway. My thing is about memory and all that. And got to know a bunch of people there, and still today in contact with those people, and did a piece that really was about the house and the genesis of that house, and had a great time doing it. So when Ricky wanted me to come back for the 15th anniversary, that was like a return to paradise.
And you went back as a curator, or did
I was supposed to go back only as a curator, but I couldn't help myself. I ended up doing a house.
Good.
So I did a house. My son did a house. And what was really funny about that is my son and my daughter have always been my helpers against their will, but it's something they just have to do. So my son was like, he said, "Mom, this is like deja vu, because when I was 9 and you made me come down here to help you put this installation." And he said, "That old guy that taught me dominoes is still here, and he's still beating me at dominoes." So his whole house was on dominoes, because dominoes are a real important factor on that block. But it was great to include him and M. Barsamian, who's one of my best friends, but had done houses after I had done them. I've involved him in it, and then a couple of other people that I worked with here in Dallas, and then Jesse Locke was the only original artist from the original houses that was in it. So it was great. It was a fabulous experience. Again.
So when did you become interested in the idea of public art? Was it your first job as an administrator in Connecticut?
I actually am not interested in public art.
But you have collaborated on projects in Dallas.
I know. I do it for the money. What can I tell you? Just being honest.
Honest answer. That's all I need to hear.
I really don't. Because the thing is, my work doesn't really lend itself to public art. I don't want to engage people in my thought processes, and So I've done public art projects, and it is primarily for the money, because you can get a design fee of $15,000, and you've designed something. And if it ever gets built, like I'm not one of those artists that goes, "Oh, they didn't do my project." I'm like, "Got my check. I'm on my way. If you do it, you do it. If you don't, you don't." That's just an honest answer. The public art project that I have enjoyed doing is one of my dart stations. The other two, not so much.
Which one is the one?
The one I love is the Hatcher Street station, because that's the one that engaged, the kids, and I really felt like it was a community kind of a project, and I also felt like, because it's connected to our center in the sense that it's the same neighborhood, that I had a vested interest in those kids being involved in that project, because it's their neighborhood.
Can you describe how you involved the kids in the project?
I worked with about 110 kids. Well, it's what we do.
Right?
But I went to the schools, because I knew all the art teachers in all the schools around here. I went to the schools, and I would work with them after school every day. I had them interview elders in the community about how South Dallas used to be, and then I had them talk about how they thought South Dallas was, and then they had to create images about back in the day and what they thought of. And those images became the centerpiece for the porcelain enamel quilt piece that we have out there. I created the quilt patterns, but then their pictures became the rest of the quilt.
That's so neat.
Yeah, so the elders were thrilled, because no one had ever asked them anything about their lives, So these kids, and the kids were thrilled, because they were like, "These old people know something." It's great. So that's how that project developed. And then I did the research and all for all the rest of it. I have markers that are indicative of what South Dallas used to be like in terms of the business community, because it used to be the heart of the black business community. And almost all of those businesses are gone. So they're like these markers now that you cross over when you cross the tracks, that are ads from old black newspapers of those businesses. And then the lake that used to be there is, of course, totally gone. They paved that over and built the project. So the bottom part of the columns are representative of the lake that used to be there. And then I have the plaques of the original black neighborhoods are sandblasted on the columns. So it's kind of like, the history of South Dallas in the station.
Wonderful. So So in '97, you became the manager of the South Dallas
I did.
Center. And what was the center's relationship to the local community when you started, and how has that changed?
Well, the immediate neighborhood didn't even know what this building was. Literally, people came and thought this was the parole office, because the parole office is down the street, and it looked like a parole office, cinder block building, nothing to really distinguish it. And more importantly, the community didn't have any real engagement in this building as far as the programming. And when I got lured back into government, because this is a government job, as fun as it is, it's a government job. It was because I had opened this center in my other incarnation in the city of Dallas, and I knew what it could be. I had high hopes for it. So when Margie Reese, who was at the time the Office of Cultural Affairs director, came to me and said, I really need that center to be functional, I jumped at the chance, because it was like, wow, this is an opportunity for me to really make the programming happen that I know could happen there, and to get these kids that live in this immediate neighborhood engaged in this place, as well as their families. So it was like the dream job, because I knew that we also had the opportunity for me to curate, which I love doing. I also would have had the opportunity to support a number of artists in the community, because you did at that time there was a lot of more money than there is now. I was able to have contracts with a number of artists to do various and sundry things. And I also wanted to be able to, because I taught at Booker T, I wanted to be able to provide some sort of resource so that so many of these artists who came out of Booker T didn't feel like they had to move out of Dallas in order to be able to do their craft. So it was just all around a great opportunity for me. And I guess not too long after getting involved in the center, I also decided that, like DR, this place needed to have a national profile. And I was the person that I thought could do that. So.
What kind of programs did you initiate that you might say you're most proud of?
Well, it's no longer happening, but we initiated the first, tell those to that DMA crowd, late night jam. And ours actually started at midnight and went until 3 a.m.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's what I said.
That is a jam.
After about, if you're dealing with the musicians, they don't get off their gigs until 1 o'clock. So, you gotta have an opportunity for the real musicians, the ones who are really gigging, to come in and be a part of it. And so we've had major players, come through. When Roy Hargrove would come to town and we were having a gig, he would always drop in, Fathead came through. I mean, we had a lot of good people come through as a result of the quality of what we were doing. That's one program. The gallery program. The fact that I got a gallery built, because what we started off with was these 4 little corner walls, like they were drywall here, drywall there. I mean, it was just so I'm very proud of the visual arts program. I brought national artists to this town that they would never have seen otherwise. And of course supported a number of the up and coming young visual artists from this community. I also am very proud of our summer program, because that too, I was able to bring a lot of my friends from around the country in. John Scott, before he died, he did a metal casting workshop for my kids. I mean, I couldn't have paid for that. John did that as a favor to me. Napoleon Henderson came down and did the same thing with enameling, So those are the kinds of things that I don't know that we could have done those if you hadn't had somebody sitting in the seat who actually had those kind of national connections. I mean, we've had Elizabeth Catlett here, so.
And what do you hope for the future of the South Dallas Cultural?
Well, my last chore was to get us connected nationally and internationally to an entity that could keep us there. And that's what my motivation for becoming a part of the National Performance Network was, which now has, of course, the Visual Artists Network also. That affiliation allows this center, and they'll have it once I'm gone. I mean, you know, the thing is, it's now a partner. And I don't guess I'm talking out of school, but I think we just got Dallas Contemporary in.
Wow.
I don't know if we can tell you that.
Oh, well,
By the time this airs,
it'll
it'll
public knowledge.
It'll definitely be public because we already voted them in and what have you. And that'll make us the only two in North Texas. So it's, you know, that's the kind of stuff that will see this center through for years to come. I mean, as long as the network exists. And the network, of course, is supported by people like the Duke Foundation, and the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Ford Foundation. I mean, there are all these major entities that support it. So they're aware now of the South Dallas Cultural Center. Of course, it doesn't hurt that I'm now the chair. But, you know, that's the other thing.
It doesn't hurt at all. Great.
So that's my goal, is to make sure that the center has the credibility and the visibility on more than just the local scene. Because I think that that's what's needed for artists of color. They can't ever make one place the place that's going to be their panacea. You know, they have to think globally. At least that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what have you found to be the greatest challenge to having a career in Dallas, whether as an artist or an arts administrator?
More as an artist for me, because I can't complain about my life as an arts administrator in this town. I mean, you know, literally, I've done any and everything I've ever wanted to do in Dallas. As an artist, of course, if I did want this to be the place where I could, you know, have an art career, it would be a true challenge. Because there's still, as I said earlier, there's still very limited opportunities for artists of color to show. And there also are, and I shouldn't even say artists of color, there are very limited opportunities for local artists, period. But for the artists of color, it's even magnified because you don't have any professional galleries that exist that would be interested, you know. And you also have very few real collectors. So the idea of you selling your work, I mean, anything over $500 is a challenge. So, you know, that's all that I would see as being the reason why Dallas is a challenge. And I think, like I said, it's a challenge for all the local artists, white, black, brown, Asian, you know, Indian, whatever. They all are challenged in that way.
And in your opinion, are there any major turning points in Dallas's contemporary art history? Or were there any moments in Dallas there was a shifting in support, and kind of what brought that change on?
I think there definitely is. Well, I don't know. It's kind of hard when you talk about turning points. I think what happened in Dallas is the same thing that happened in a lot of cities in the South, where you had a lot of migration from major corporations who brought people who were used to certain things, and therefore they had to see that replicated here. So that kind of, I mean, for instance, when Frito-Lay and J.C. Penney's and some of the Blue Cross Blue Shield, when some of those corporations moved here, they started collecting. And some of them actually collected local artists, or at least Texas artists. And that was a major turning point for many of the artists, is that they all of a sudden had corporate curators who were interested in their work. And so, quite naturally, you were going to have more exposure for those artists nationally, because these were national headquarters. That was a big turning point. That was in the 80s, the late 80s. And then the other thing was just the DMA, its focus changed when Rick Bertel got there. And like that 2 Centuries show opened up a new audience, Rick Bertel opened up a lot of audiences to the DMA with his approach to partnering with institutions that weren't mainstream, bringing in people who were not the typical mainstream visual arts personnel. So that that changed things. Then you had things like Southside on Lamar. I mean, that was a whole new concept for Dallas. We had artist co-ops because 500X started out as that, and that was a groundbreaking institution in its time. But you never had developers who came in with that vision. That it wasn't like Soho where they were going to have the artists redo it and then supplant them and then nobody could afford to be there. I mean, Jack Matthews and Christian Telecki are about supporting artists and all types of artists, not just visual arts, but all types of artists. So that facility became, a sort of game changer. And then, everybody now is saying they're doing it, but, it's the way it works. So, those are some of the things that changed. And then I think you also had a change with Booker T. Washington. I mean, that was well before I got here, but that school was turning out some of the most talented and serious artists. I mean, even more so than many of the universities. That school made a big difference in what Dallas needed to have in order to keep those kids here. So,
where do you go to look at art?
I'm not that much of an art looker.
Really?
My motivation is not from art. My motivation has never been from seeing other visual art, except as a baby. I mean, when I was a little kid, I did. But I am much more interested in music and dance and theater. Now, theater, I will say, that's the only thing that I'm still a chauvinist about the East Coast. I still have to go back to New York to see consistently good African American theater. But music-wise, Dallas is, full of really great, musicians. I'm a jazz fan, so, a lot of great jazz musicians. There's some very good dance companies here. And I'm also obviously very motivated by history and those kinds of things. But visual arts, not so much.
Where can I go to see your work? Aside from this gallery, which I want you to kind of just talk about in a moment, but if I wanted to see work by you, where do I go?
You would be hard pressed to see it because my work was never permanent. So, unless I'm doing an installation, I don't know that from the African American Museum has work of mine in their collection, but it's very atypical because mainly it's been done for a particular show there as opposed to the kind of work that I normally would do. In Dallas, you would be hard pressed to find the work except in the African American Museum and private collections.
Do you have photographs of installation? Do you keep
all? Oh yes, I have yes, absolutely.
Very much documenting.
And a lot of catalogs, because I've been lucky in that I've been in shows that have had catalogs as a part of the show.
And you are working on something at the museum currently, aren't you?
Yes.
Why don't you tell us
I am. It's actually not me per se. The South Dallas Cultural Center as a team was invited to be a part of the C3, what do they call it? Public, I forget what they've got a name for it. What? You don't know?
I know. I'm just a little researcher.
Okay. But it's the interaction between the public and space and what have you. So we were invited to create a work for that space, and we are working on it right now. And it's got a visual art component, a literary component, digital media component, and a dance component. So all of that is going to be somehow synthesized into a visual experience and an interactive experience. Because our dancer is creating a dance pattern. It'll be on the floor, but there'll be a screen where she will also be instructing on how to do this dance. And then the music part of it, Malik is creating these stations where people will respond to these images to create music, and then there'll be these words that will be also taken from the poem that's being created by our literary person that people will use to create music from. And the whole thing is, the premise of it is called free association, and the whole thing is premised on the idea of space as a limitation, as a metaphor for the African American experience, but how we've transcended those limitations and using things like music and the arts, etc., to do that, to transcend that experience. So that's kind of what we're hoping will come out of it. We've created this silo that has these openings that are not terribly comfortable to get in, but we have these cameras where we're gonna see how people negotiate limitations. And then, like I said, there'll be these creation stations where they can create music that goes with these images.
When will I be able to see this?
I think it's opening in May. I think they said May is when it's going to open, and it'll be up for 6 months. And we're going to program it too. We're going to have some scheduled programming that will let people sort of engage in what is happening there, but also to get them to understand more about what that installation is about.
Good. Last question before you tell us about your work. What is your greatest memory or favorite story in relation to the contemporary living in Dallas as an artist or as an administrator? It's very broad, but if there's one that sticks out in your mind, and keep in mind the focus of this is, the history of arts in Dallas from '63 to the present. So,
that's an interesting question because I'm wondering, memorable. Well. I guess for me, it's been watching the way in which the museum community, and not just the Dallas Museum of Art, but SMU, Meadows Museum, how they have broadened their perspectives based on understanding that the demographics has changed in this city. And so I've been very excited actually about the way in which things have changed in the museum scene. You probably know that Roz Walker and I have been friends for a long time, but hiring her was a very smart decision on the part of the Dallas Museum of Art. Not because she's an incredible scholar and knows her stuff, but Roz is also somebody who clearly understands engaging public. And when she was the director of the African Museum at the Smithsonian, she was always reaching out and getting people in. So that part of her job, I know it's not her job, but it is her job in the sense that she sees this as a mission. That is going to really benefit the museum greatly. And I think now with the new director also having a history of doing that kind of reaching out, I think that the DMA is poised to be really on the cutting edge of serving a community in a way that many major museums are not. So that's exciting to me.